Hi, Trina community. I'm Abhi from Airbyte, and today I'm going to be talking about how to consolidate your data sources with Airbyte. Here's a problem that, as a Trina user, you may have run into before. Let's just say you have a bunch of different data sources in a lot of different locations, and when you're trying to run Trina queries across a lot of these different data sources, your queries end up taking a really long amount of time. So you then think, okay, let's consolidate my data. Let's put it into one location. So you look for an ETL tool or an ELT tool, and you find that they're closed source, they cost a lot of money, and maybe they're not extensible. That's kind of where Airbyte comes in. Airbyte is a open source, highly extensible and configurable ETL tool that allows you to pretty much take it off the shelf and start syncing data within minutes. Today, we're going to be going over how to move data into S3 and going over kind of like what Airbyte can enable you to do as a Trino user. As kind of an overview, Airbyte allows you to incrementally sync your data. For example, if you want to run an analytics job or want to run some sort of query every day. You can set it to sync every 24 hours and only pull in new data. The first pull will obviously be will take a while because that's going to be the bulk of your data. And then after that, you're only going to be syncing new data. Additionally, Airbyte is deployed wherever you can put Docker containers. So you can self-host it on ECS, EC2, any Kubernetes variant, and it's obviously going to be, since it's self-hosted, it's going to be as secure as your own infrastructure is. So let's go ahead and just get into deploying an Airbyte instance and then syncing some data to S3. So in order to deploy an Airbyte instance, all we need to do is go ahead and run docker compose up in the Airbyte repo. This is actually pretty much from a fresh installation of the repo. So there was no previous configuration that needed to be done here. And right now, we're now spinning up all of the containers that we need in Docker. For example, we're spinning up our scheduler, we're spinning up our server, the front end, and then a quick, and then an init container that'll help get things going. And after we get access to Airbyte, which we are now ready, we can now access this at localhost 8000. I did have, the thing that I did do beforehand is I did have all of the Docker containers pre-downloaded. So when you run Airbyte for the first time, it's probably going to be a little slower because you're going to be pulling Docker images. So let's just go ahead and say I'll be at Airbyte, and let's go ahead and continue in. So here's the Airbyte start screen. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to set up a source. So we need a source and a destination to create a connection. We can either go through the onboarding workflow or we can do it manually. I'll do it just manually just to kind of show how a normal workflow would look like. So let's just say, just to keep it simple, I want to use a source for data that doesn't really have any configuration required so that we can focus maybe on our destination. So we'll use the open source and no auth required Pokemon API that'll just allow us to pull information about Pokemon down. It doesn't really matter what information we're pulling down, so I just want to use dummy data. So we'll call this Cinco de Trino Pokemon. And then we'll put my favorite Pokemon in. And now what Airbyte is doing in the back end is it's verifying that it did it a little fast, but it's verifying that it can talk to that API, and it's running all the connection checks. So it's run all of our connection checks, so it's verified that we can successfully pull information down from the Poke API. The next thing we need to do is we need to go into our destinations. So now we need to set up our S3 destination. So we can go ahead and type S3 here. And then now we can go ahead and get this information from our S3 bucket. So this is the name of the bucket that I've set up for this demo. We can go ahead and put that here. We can just call this Pokemon Cinco de... We can call this just Pokemon destination, actually. And then what we can do is we can go ahead and say S3 bucket path. Let's go ahead and just put it here. And we'll just put it in a directory called raw under our Airbyte Cinco de Trino directory path. We know that we are in US East 2, and then we'll go ahead and put our IDs in. Now we can go ahead and actually set whatever output format we want. So if you use Avro, if you use Parquet, you can go ahead and do that. We can go ahead with Parquet, but we won't be able to as simply read it. So I'm just going to go ahead and just throw it out in CSV, and we'll just say no compression, and I believe we should be good to go. So let's just go ahead and set up our destination. Now, similarly to how we were testing the source, Airbyte is now checking that we can successfully connect to the S3 instance or the S3 bucket using the credentials that I just gave, and it'll check that your path is correct, and it'll check that. So, for example, if you tried to use a bad path here or something that wouldn't actually work, it'll actually give you an error and reject it back at you. So now what we can do is we can go ahead and create a connection. So let's just go ahead and this is going to be our source that we set up. So we're going to get Pokemon data from about Crobat, my favorite Pokemon, and we're going to pipe that into our Pokemon destination. Now you'll see here that when we set up multiple sources and one destination, we can just keep going to this connections tab and just select these sources that we've set up, and then just basically all point them all to this one destination. So in this case, we're going to be doing a one-to-one thing, but if you had multiple different sources, you'd be able to point them all to that one destination that you set up. So we're going to set this replication frequency to be every 24 hours. And then the rest is we're just gonna keep the same. You have an option to create a destination string prefix, which will basically prepend this whatever string you want to give it to all of the output for all of the output files. We can also choose the sync modes. Unfortunately, the Pokemon API only supports refreshing the entire data every time, but here's where you would select. Here's where you would select syncing incrementally as opposed to refreshing all of the data every time. So let's just go ahead and set up this connection. And all we need to do is just hit sync now. And we will now be pushing data, pulling data down from the Pokemon API and pushing it to our S3 bucket. It says it's succeeded already, so let's just go ahead and check our bucket. Let's just go ahead and look in here. I think we might need to refresh our page really quick. And there's the raw directory, and here's the Pokemon file. So if we go ahead and just quickly download that CSV, we can see the data that we've retrieved. So yeah, now we can see that we have all of this Airbyte data that we've retrieved. It's fairly not human readable because I think the data that we received from the Pokemon API is not very readable, but we have successfully synced data from our data source to our data destination. We can now, as I mentioned, this isn't necessarily consolidating data or showing that you can consolidate data, but I want to kind of show you that you can go through and let's just say, as a more realistic example, you wanted to sync your Salesforce data. So all you'd have to do is set up your Salesforce source, go to this connections page and set up a connection in the same way that I just did. And then you'll start syncing data to S3 or to any data warehouse that you choose. So I hope this was a cool overview of what you could do with Airbyte. And you can get up and running immediately if you just go to the Airbyte GitHub repository. And if you want to learn more, please come to the Airbyte Slack community. We would be glad to talk to anything data engineering and anything about how to help you get up and running. So thank you so much for your time, and I'm